Hello, Counselor Doherty.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the committee meeting. Madam Chair, I'm just, before we get started, if it's all right with you to just do a brief introduction for those who are attending today.
Yes.
Thank you. So, Madam Chair, I'm just going to first confirm that we do currently have quorum. I have only received regrets from Ms. Everett, so I hope that there might be a couple more that pop on as we get started here. I would also like to confirm that staff who are present this afternoon are Ruth Nordegraff, Director, Housing and Social Services, Mitchell Grange, Manager of Housing and Homelessness, Joanne Boris, the Housing Program Administrator, Janet James, Deputy City Clerk is on the line with us, as well as Ian Sullivan, who is our meeting host. I am Elizabeth Fawcett, and I'm the committee clerk for this committee. I can also confirm at this time, Madam Chair, that we have currently 20 members of the public who are viewing at this time. And with that, I will turn it over to you to get us started.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And I'll also add, we also have Counselor Hutchison with us as well today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did mean to include him as well on my list. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Okay, so I will bring the meeting to order. Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for being here with us, for all of our committee members, as well as for our city staff and for all of our public joining us as well today. That's wonderful. So we'll commence with the approval of the agenda. We do have an addendum to add, which was some correspondence, the correspondence regarding housing services in Kingston. So I will add that to the agenda. So I am looking for a first for the agenda today, unless there's any discussion regarding that or notices of business. Counselor Smith, sorry, did you have a question, or is that for a first? For a first, thank you. And might I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Clark. And are all in favor? If I could see a show of hands. Perfect. So we're all in favor, no opposition. Okay, so we will move into the confirmation of minutes. You have the minutes attached with the agenda. If there are any changes or additions or deletions to the minutes, can you please let me know if there's any discussion there? And if there is no discussion as to the minutes, then I will move for a first to accept the minutes. Thank you, Councillor Neal. Could I have a second? Thank you, Ms. White. And then if I could see a show of hands for all in favor, please. Perfect. So that is everyone. So that carries, and there are no oppositions. We'll move into disclosure of pecuniary interest. If there is any from any of our committee members, if you could please let me know now. Okay, so seeing no issue there, we will continue on. Delegations, we have no registered delegations. So we'll move into item 6, which is briefings. And this is also tied with business item A, you will notice. So I will introduce Ruth Nordegraff, Director, Housing and Social Services, Mitchell Grange, Manager, Housing and Homelessness, Joanne Boris, Housing Services Administrator, who are all present to speak to the committee regarding the homelessness system review draft recommendations and next steps.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, thanks for having us. I know it's quite the agenda that you have in front of you today. So we just wanted to briefly speak to the reports that are in front of you, and specifically the homelessness system review draft recommendations report. I will hand it over to Mitchell Grange in a minute. I just wanted to kind of put this kind of report in the context of the last couple of years. And I know Mitch will go through that, but we thought it would be good, and I know there's quite a bit of reading material attached to the report to go through the reports just in summary. But specifically, we obviously would like to really point your attention to the appendix, I believe it's Appendix D, that has the kind of summary of the draft kind of recommendations that came out of the various documents and work that has happened so far. And obviously, there's still quite a bit of work ahead of us. So we thought it would be really important to come to committee now to give you an update, give you an opportunity to respond, ask questions, and as you will see, we will come back to you with a more final version as well. So that being said, I will pass it over to Mitchell. And I think, Elizabeth, I hope you will help us go through the slides as well.
Thanks, Ruth, and through you, Madam Chair. If we can start with the presentation, and please let me know if there's a trouble with my audio. Sometimes with the computer has some issues, so please flag that if that comes up. But so first, we just wanted to say why at this point are we going through a system review. So next slide, please. So really, there's many aspects as to why we're doing this. It really is to support the implementation and direction of our 10-year municipal housing and homelessness plan and our 5-year update to the plan to ensure we're aligning with the current needs and we're responsive to the system as it is now. It's an ever-changing sector. When we first introduced the agreements, I'd say approximately 8 years ago, the system looked a lot different at that point. We went through a renewal process 3 years ago, which was really, there were some slight tweaks to the agreements, but really it was status quo. So we knew the time to kind of review the agreements was now, and then certainly throw on the events of the last year with the pandemic and identifying some additional gaps in our services. We knew that it was time to do this fulsome system review. So the agreements are set to expire at the end of July of this year. However, we have we will be looking at extending those agreements to the end of 2021 to allow for the system review to take place. And throughout last year and even today, we're still hearing from service users. We're hearing from the individuals who are accessing all the services as to what needs to happen, what needs to change. And we've done that through, in 2020, we did a needs assessment when Bell Park was set up, and we heard from the clients loud and clear, the service users, that there needed to be change for them to access supports. We also, as part of our qualitative assessment, a review of the system review, which I'll speak to in a minute, that happened in late 2020 with engagement with our service providers and clients, that changes needed to happen. So I know my audio may be a bit muddled, so I'm just going to try and speak a little closer. Hopefully that helps. So next slide, please. So the process so far. Next slide. So in order to get things started and to make sure there's fully transparency, we wanted to have a group to kind of bounce ideas off of. We introduced and we established the Homelessness System Community Advisory Group, consisting of agencies who were non-funded by the city regarding our homelessness services. So that they included members of council, members of this committee, the United Way, addictions and mental health services, counseling, a member of the Indigenous community, and County Frontenac. I believe that's all. If I'm missing one, I apologize. So like I said, we have had a qualitative review completed to date on the services and the overview of the current system. And we spoke to service providers, service users, and community partners to understand their needs. We have incorporated Dr. Carrie Ann Marshall's report on the research paper on thriving after homelessness. You'll see that they are built into the recommendation matrix you have in front of you. So really, parts 1, 2, and 3 are what is in front of you of the recommendation matrix. Part 4 is the work we're doing with org code. They've been hired to do more of a quantitative review of the system, and their work is ongoing. So what that includes is a look at our coordinated access and our by name list, our programs and how they align, and is the money being best spent and allocated with the programs we have in place, and looking at some cost sector analysis with other jurisdictions to see how we can position our funding to get the most out of it and to best serve our clients. We're looking at the development of new agreements as well, and org code will be assisting with that, as well as the creation of the request for proposal documents, which will be going later towards the end of summer into early fall. So next slide, please. And sort of draft recommendations. So we do have some emerging themes coming out of this. So what you'll see in the matrix is that there's a header for kind of the overarching theme. So what I've done is just kind of given you an example of what that may look like for each section. And certainly the matrix covers a lot more. But in terms of systemic issues, we know that there needs to be a creation of more affordable, supportive and transitional housing supply. There needs to be in terms of a need for person-centered and trauma-informed service delivery. We want to increase the engagement with our service users to understand their needs. We'll also be doing this through the RFP process and ensuring that all of our service providers are fully trained on trauma and client-centered approaches and harm reduction techniques. Improve communication and collaboration. We want to continue to sit at tables along with our service providers and community members to ensure that we're communicating and collaborating effectively throughout the system. Next slide, please. The funding model, again, org code will be looking at this. We want to evaluate the funding and see if it's best spent the way it is now, or if it's a better way to structure and framework the funding that we have available to us through provincial and municipal dollars. We also want to ensure that our data is sound, and we build off our programming based off of our data. So we're doing a lot of great work with the Built for Zero campaign and our by name list. We've reached the quality by name list and quality veteran by name list, and we'll be working with our representative from the Built for Zero initiative for the month of June to set our targets for the next year. But we also want to make sure the accountability piece is built into the service agreements for our service providers to hold them accountable to what they agreed to deliver. And lastly, just to highlight a few of our emerging themes is the programming. So we'll continue to work with org code through the process to understand the impact being made by the current system and ways to enhance service delivery to ultimately get to the end result of assisting our service users. Next slide, please. So next steps. So as I mentioned, org code, they're finalizing their quantitative work. So we'll gather those and incorporate those into the draft recommendation matrix you see in front of you, which will then finalize the recommendations. We will have another round of engagement with service users, community members, community partners throughout the month of July, at which point we will, and it's not listed here, but we will bring a special report back, hopefully to the Housing and Homelessness Committee sometime in early to mid-August, outlining the final recommendations based on feedback from today and get final feedback in August to then in turn go to Council in September for a recommendation report to approve the final recommendations and the implementation plan of this system review. So we'll be creating requests for proposal documents throughout the month of June and July and August, and issuing them in September, and with anticipated new system and new system delivery for January 2022. So next slide, please. I know this is a lot of information to take in. I'm hopefully just summarizing what's in the briefing or the fulsome kind of report that we have ahead of us. So if I may just finish this last slide, this is just an overview as to what I discussed just as a visual. So September, we brought an initial report to the Housing and Homelessness Committee advising of the system review. Insight Consulting performed a qualitative review in October. The establishment of the Homelessness System Community Advisory Group took place in November. Those meetings have been held throughout the months of November, December, all the way through, still continuing to date, to get their expertise and input as to recommendations that we have in front of you today. We're here today at the draft, presenting the draft recommendation report. As I said, throughout June and July, we'll be creating the RFP framework and documentation with assistance with org code. In August, we'll be looking to do a special meeting to the Housing and Homelessness Committee based on the final recommendations. And in September again, we'll go to council looking for the adoption of through a recommendation report of the next steps in the implementation plan, at which point we would release the RFP documents. We would evaluate the submissions throughout the month of October, go back to council in November, seeking approval on the recommendations of the outcomes of the RFP submissions, prepare the service agreements in December, and again, the new system would take place and be in place in January. So I believe that's it. So next slide is questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grange. Ruth, I'm not sure if you had anything you wanted to add to that, or if Joanne did prior to opening questions to the committee.
Thank you, and to you, Madam Chair. No, I just wanted to, again, remind the committee that I know there's a lot of information to take in, but we just wanted to give you a high-level overview of what's in front of you. I know really the kind of the key information is, and the kind of the summary is in the appendix, but there also will be, as Mitch just kind of presented, opportunity to review and engage in the actual engagement process moving forward. So this is definitely not the last time this will be in front of you. We just really wanted to make sure that you're fully involved in the process and have an opportunity to ask any questions, any clarifications, any follow-ups. No, that's it.
Perfect, thank you. So for members of the committee, when it is time for briefings, following the briefing, our committee members have the opportunity to ask questions. And then following that, we move over to business items. And I will just make note that following each business item, there will be an opportunity for committee members to ask questions or make comments, as well as Councillor Hutchison, who is with us. And then following those questions or comments, we then open up to the public. Each member of the public would have the ability or opportunity to speak as well for 5 minutes. And then at the very end of everyone from the public speaking, city staff would then respond to those questions. Just so everyone is aware. So for briefings, was there anyone from our committee who had any questions? Councillor Neal and Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much. Mr. Grange is right. This is an awful lot of information, and I've been on the committee for some time, and some of this is new information for me, so I would really appreciate if the clerk could send to the committee and make publicly available the slide deck that was provided today. And I do have a quick question for the clerk. It was my understanding that some of the members of the committee, myself included, had an opportunity to talk to somebody from the Built for Zero Canada group and Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. And I was hoping and under the understanding that they'd be coming in delegation. And I shared that with the clerk. were you unable to connect or to make that so?
Sorry, Madam Chair, through you, if I could just respond to Councillor Neal. I did try to reach out to the individual who you had requested could come to present to the committee. Unfortunately, I did not hear back from that individual, and we do require those wishing to appear as delegation to self-register in order to appear. So hopefully we'll be able to connect with this individual and perhaps have her to another meeting.
I would really appreciate that if you can coordinate that for our next meeting. That would be really helpful. A couple of questions that I had, and either Ruth or Mitch could offer answers to these. I understand that Reaching Home Fund, which is a federal funding group, in fact, we have benefited from that group. Is that accurate? And just curious how much and what are the strings attached, as they always are, to federal and provincial funding? So I think Ruth has her hand up.
Sorry, just having too many screens open at the same time. I apologize. Through you, Madam Chair. So that is correct, Councillor Neal. We are a Reaching Home community. The Reaching Home funding is administered through the Community Advisory Board, or the community entity, which in Kingston is the United Way. This is not the same in every community. This is, something that was established through the federal government. I will defer to Mitch or Joanne to get the actual amounts. I believe we refer to it in the report, but we are in close collaboration, and you will see in the recommendations as well that one of the key things that we want to make sure of is that we have a funders kind of table and a more kind of coordinated funding approach, and see how we can complement our TIPI funding, our provincial funding, our municipal contributions, and the federal funding. So we're aligned. We as a city have a voting kind of membership at the Community Advisory Board. I think there's a few community members actually as well, even on this committee, that might sit at the Community Advisory Board. So there is alignment. And I will have to defer to Mitch or Joanne for the actual amount. I believe it's about $400,000 annually. It has also had some increased dollars due to COVID, but they were more like one-time costs.
Thank you. If there isn't any further comment on that, I also inquired about the concept of low barrier shelters. And the response I got was that we are moving towards, or we are attempting to organize a low barrier shelter. Could you tell me where we're at with that whole concept?
I will start for you, Madam Chair. As part of the system review, we obviously are recognizing that a key thing will be around the rules and expectations and access to the services, which has been discussed at many different tables. We obviously have a new service in our community, the Integrated Care Hub, which has been fairly low barrier, but is also serving a specific group of people. So it might not be the right location for everybody. So we definitely are looking at like what are the restrictions and expectations and finding the right balance between, safe environment for clients, for staff. I will refer this one also to Joanne and Mitch to jump in to add some additional information on that one. Joanne.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Councillor Neal, the concept of low barrier is it's somewhat precarious, and it is judged by each individual shelter. So when a shelter really works with a harm reduction and trauma-informed approach, the philosophy is that they're meeting individuals where they're at coming to shelter. So our shelters do function as relatively low barrier at this time, in that when it comes to restrictions, they're looking at ways to only implement restrictions if there is a risk to the other individuals within the shelter themselves, or to staff as a measure of behavior that can't be controlled by the client. So one of the things that we're looking at through the RFP process is to really take a really good look at what our current restrictions look like, where they're coming from, and how they're being dealt with, because that ultimately will make the determination as to whether or not we are a low barrier shelter and are able to meet that concept. So definitely something that we're looking into at this point in time. I will say that as far as the dropping goes, Ms. Nordegraff is completely correct. Integrated Care Hub is very low barrier, and it, again, has the sleeping pods overnight and drop in, and it's about as low barrier as you can get for social service / homeless organizations in the province. I hope that helps.
It's my understanding that a number of people routinely are turned away from our primary shelter providers. So there have been some issues around how low that barrier is, or how high it is. The other thing that I was curious about was Mitch presented the whole concept of the community consultation committee, or that isn't what it's called, but whatever it was called. And I'm just wondering who's on that committee, how the selection took place, and is it right that that's considered a requirement under the Reaching Home funding, or under the conditions of some of our funding?
Through you, Madam Chair, just so I'm sure I understand the question. So Councillor Neal, you are asking specifically about how the Reaching Home funding committee is established, or how the system review?
How that, it's the first, all the time I've been on this committee, it's the first time I've heard that there's this other consultation committee. And I'm just curious about how it came about and how the selection took place, because I know it was never a selection that came through the nominations committee or anything like that. So I'm just trying to get my head around that.
Yeah, and just to clarify, you are talking specifically about the system review process, not the Reaching Home the Reaching Home table. Those are two different tables.
I'm talking about the committee that Mr. Grange presented in the slide deck.
Thanks for clarifying. And I will say, I just got the number for the Reaching Home dollars that you just asked, and it's close to $400,000 annually that's being received by the federal government to the Reaching Home entity in our community. So I can speak to the establishment of the System Review Committee. This was, and I know Councillor Neal, I don't think you were on this committee prior to at this point, but in September 2020, we brought forward a report to this committee to map out the proposed process, including the establishment of a system advisory group. And as part of that, the process. So we asked, I believe, 2 or 3 members of this Housing and Homelessness Committee to represent at that table. And also, because there's also funding coming from the Reaching Home, to also have 2 or 3 members from that table. And we specifically did not want funded agencies at that table, because we're reviewing an existing system. We did invite a few of our healthcare partners to the table, given kind of the pressures in the system. We also have and will continue to have many different engagements with people with lived experience, service providers. And again, we will continue to move forward and do that in July to also have another opportunity to hear from members of the public, clients, and service providers.
Yeah. Are there any current members of this committee that sit on that committee?
Yes, and this is a test for me, but I know Mr. Clark, Councillor Dorothy, and I hope I'm not missing somebody, are on the committee. And Joanne and Mitch, you can totally help me out here.
Okay.
We're correct, you, Ruth.
Yeah, that's correct.
I believe Mr. Grange was on for a second there, if he had anything to add. I think the difficulty sometimes is we set up committees, they kind of overlap in their terms of reference or what they're trying to achieve. And I just went through this with 2 other committees, both of which I sit on, and there isn't a lot of communication back and forth. And I think it would be helpful if they knew what actions we were doing and we knew what ideas they were presenting as well. So if that can happen, so that would be helpful. And I apologize to Councillor Doherty. I've taken up an awful lot of time and I know her hand was up. So I will yield the chair to Councillor Doherty.
No need to apologize for asking questions, Councillor. That's why we're here.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks, Jim. Good questions. Yeah, it is. I just wonder is there a possibility for people to pick up hard copies of the report, and what kind of system do we have in place for people who may not have technology? Because what we're doing to ensure that we hear from people who are experiencing homelessness. So could they go to City Hall and pick up a hard copy and even, write on the hard copy and hand that in to staff? Or
I see Mr. Range has his hand up, so I'm happy to pass it on to him for response.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor, and Chair. Yes, certainly we can make options and copies available. Also, we will be going through a public engagement again, bringing these recommendations forward to individuals with lived experience or service users through focus groups, where they will have the opportunity to comment on the draft recommendations proposed. So I think between those 2 avenues, there will be opportunity for them to provide comments and suggestions.
for that, yeah, it's so important that we remember that not everybody has the technology. We make a lot of assumptions. I had an elderly woman just ask me the other day, she was on a phone call and she asked me, what is the pound key? What does pound mean? So we talk in a lot of, we live in a world of technology, but we assume that everybody else does too. So it's important we have that system, and that we also let people know that they can access it. So we not just set up the system so that we have hard copies, but also let people know that they can get them from us and return them to us. Francesca, you're welcome to jump in. I do have other questions, but I don't want to interrupt you. Yeah.
Okay, just as far as technology is concerned, I cannot download anything except JPEG files. So, it leaves me at a bit of a loss. And I would far rather have a hard copy that I can read. So that would be beneficial for me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's good information too. And I have a woman that I regularly speak with, and she sometimes she can't she doesn't have Wi-Fi, so sometimes she goes in the hallway to access Wi-Fi from other people. So it is really, really important that we remember that. And then the other question I had is, in this system review, how do we build in any adjustments when things change? For example, the great announcement, the partnership with TP Moser and Lower Union. So as things change, and how do we shift? Because I think sometimes we get stuck in systems and we need to build in flexibility. So I wonder if you could speak to that.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm happy to start, and we'll have Joanne and Mitch chime in here as well. So absolutely, we don't want to be in the same situation 5 years from now where we have not been able to evaluate and have a better sense of data, and especially more importantly, to your earlier comment, the opportunity to have an ongoing feedback from the clients that actually utilize the service or are not able to utilize the service. So you will see in the initial kind of draft that there is a really high emphasis on how do we continue to evaluate our services and have that people with lived experience voice really embedded in the service. We also are proposing that we have a much stronger kind of, and we call it in this document, a homelessness collective, but really have all the players around the table and have a better kind of opportunity to, again, discuss trends, data at those tables with all the different partners. And I think what we have seen as, obviously as a city, and that's definitely been sometimes a bit of the challenge, we are the system manager, so we are not providing the services directly. So how do we have a system that's nimble enough so we can use data and experience and client voices to inform what works and what doesn't work? But also, how do we balance that with providing our providers enough like certainty and enough funding to be able to do the work that they do, because it's incredibly hard work, and I think we just need to find that right balance. So we're definitely, if I look back, I know already, and we've already wanted to also point out all the work that has happened over the last few years to improve. It's not like we're just waiting until everything is done and then we'll start the work. But it definitely is something that we have been very intentional about in the process to say, how do we make changes when we can? I don't know if Joanne, if you would like to add something to that.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor Doherty. I think one of the aspects around ensuring that our service providers are able, as Ms. Nordegraaf explained, to be nimble and responsive to clients. There's a multitude of things that we have in the recommendations that I do think will help us along that journey. Most importantly is ongoing evaluations of program services from the service users themselves. We don't want to wait a couple of years to find out how service users are feeling about the services that are being provided within the community. So in the new system, what we're looking to embed is actual evaluation forms that won't go into the hands of the service providers, because we understand that service users need to feel safety and security in providing constructive feedback, positive feedback, negative feedback, whichever the case might be. So we're looking at implementing ways to be able to continuously gather service user comments, solutions, advice, etc. And then we will be able to look at those and hopefully be able to react if and when it's needed. And at least clients have another avenue for their voices to be heard at that point. That means that we will also be building into the RFP process an expectation with the service providers who apply for the RFPs that they will be expected to be somewhat nimble and responsive to client need based on the information that we get back. And not just from the clients themselves, but again, in combination with the Built for Zero work that we're doing and all of the great information and statistics that that's providing to us. So we're looking at sort of a combination approach to ensure that the work we're doing is meeting the needs of the individuals that are looking to be served. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nordegraaf and Ms. Forrest. Councillor Doherty, does that help? Thank you. Did you have any more questions, Councillor Doherty?
I don't have any more questions. There's construction going on, so I'm trying to keep my sound off as much as possible. But thank you very much for the answers. And thanks for the hard work, because the group has been meeting a lot and doing a lot of work, all of the members of that group.
Was there anyone else from our committee who would like to ask questions? I see Ms. White and I saw Mr. Clark. Ms. White, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. It was difficult to kind of hear much of Mitch's presentation. I was trying to read as quickly as I could. So my understanding is that everything that we have just been shown is going to be completely and utterly reviewed by everybody and all the community, including nonprofits, etc. And that is my understanding. So I'm hoping that is one of the things. The other thing that is still disconcerting for me is when you talk about marginalized, homeless, anybody who wants to make a complaint or has an idea, it's usually stated that you will review and decide if it's worth looking into. I would like to see more community organized groups by the committee, by the council, by the staff, where it is not just done once, but it's done maybe 2 or 3 times in 1 month, so that the community at large will have an opportunity to express how they feel. Not just an afternoon, maybe an evening as well, so that it gives everybody the opportunity to voice their concerns about what is still happening. If all this information that we've received, and if the city staff and everybody else is going to be looking at all these suggestions and reviews, that would be fantastic, because then there would be fundamental changes that will happen. I'm still concerned that the homeless shelter is not getting what it needs to have. And I'm still really concerned about how many people are seeing the integrated care hub as a shelter. It keeps being referred to as a shelter, and nobody is really looking at it for what it is, which is a safe injection site with rest beds. That is still concerning for me. The other part that I have, I believe it will be in with the housing section, so I will leave it at this moment, but my main question is, are all these reviews going to be implemented and done, and what is the time frame for this? Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that question, Ms. White. That is a big question, because I know there is a lot in this document. And I mean, obviously, it would be fantastic if we could implement everything this year, but I think, as you can see, and we've just, as a system review, we also know that there's things within our control as a system manager at the city, and some things that are not directly in our control because they might involve provincial systems or mental health or addiction systems. So we've just tried to be we've kind of spread the net really wide, because I do think we need to be very holistic with this. You cannot just look at just one piece or just another piece. So as Mr. Grange presented, the piece that we directly can kind of quote unquote manage as a system manager is the funding that we manage, which is the federal CHIPPY dollars, which is approximately $4 million annually that we receive. And we always have to also wait if the province will continue to fund us at that level. And then in addition, we have over the last few years committed approximately $500,000 to $700,000 from the municipal budget. So that's kind of the amount of funding that we can manage right now. We also have been making some comments in the draft recommendations that once we have the full picture, we may also have to go to council and say, look, this is what we would like to do. This is how much it costs us. So that's ultimately council's decision. So I'm going in a bit of a tangent here, but the long story short is we're hoping to have a good understanding by the end of this year, and then rolling out starting January 2022 to have the kind of quote unquote new system in place with those parts that we can control within this document. The reality is, and I know this is the elephant in the room, we're not able to build thousands of affordable housing units or have 500 supportive housing units in place. But obviously those are also really important in this conversation. And I think to Councillor Dorothy's point, like the initial project at Lower Union is a great start. So those are all their pieces that might not directly fall within this system, but they are important to actually get that bigger picture solution. But that will not obviously happen within the next few months. That's an ongoing conversation. But everything that's in here that's within our scope, either we are already doing it or we're implementing it because we can do it as a service manager, as city staff, and those are more the ones around data, communication, collaboration. That's where we are able to take on that role. But we also would have to go out and procure the services in the way that we would like to see them moving forward. I hope that helps. I know it's a bit vague, but it's, we can, we definitely want to be as specific as measurable, or as measurable as possible with all these individual recommendations.
As I said, I would like to see city staff and council have community involvement a lot more than what we actually see. We'll get a letter here and there that, like we have right now, attached, which it does concern me because we know that there are a lot more people in that community who would like to voice their concerns, and I feel that it's not being heard. I know there's restrictions and I know there's implementations in a lot of things, but I don't see this community happening in the way I personally would like to see it. There's not enough input, and I think that's what's needed. We have what, 124,000 people who live in Kingston, and we're not getting the output for feedback, and that is very disconcerting for me. I'd like to see a lot more city staff, etc., involved in advertising and making it more aware for everybody. But thank you for the input and the answering of my questions.
Thank you, Ms. White. Mr. Clark, I know you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. As I read the material, one of the things that strikes me is that, and let's really not lose sight of what we're trying to do here is a systems review, and I would describe it as far-reaching. And one of the things that I think is really positive is that I see aspects of a lot of the input that we've received. You can see the influence of Dr. Marshall's report in some of the recommendations. You can see some of the things that the consultants have brought to the table. And we have to remember that part of what the consultants did was talk to people with lived experience. And I think that it's really positive that one of the things that staff are looking at doing is to do a quantitative and qualitative analysis of what is in place now. Because let's face it, just because we put a program in place 5 years ago or 10 years ago, A, doesn't mean that it necessarily is working well. It also doesn't mean that it isn't. But there may be better ways to spend the scarce dollars that we have. So I think that overall, it's a very positive step, and takes us towards. I think it takes us well towards a good look at the system and improvements in the system. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Councillor Doherty.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I did forget one question, and that was, could we just get a bit of an idea what to expect in the July engagement session? Things are starting to open up with COVID, and I just wonder if you have a bit of vision. I know everything can change overnight with COVID, but I just wonder what you have in mind for July.
Through you, Madam Chair. Councillor Doria, that's a great question. We're working with our communications department to create a really fulsome engagement plan. So we're looking at a multitude, and again, we're not sure exactly how things are going to open up or what capacities will be, but we're looking to outreach to as many individuals as we possibly can in a number of different methods. Some of that will actually be working with our current service providers where clients and services currently reside to find out how they would like to be engaged with. So, we're going to find out from the clients what might work best for them and engage them in that manner. So, as I mentioned, there will be things like focus groups. There'll be publications. I know that you've mentioned potentially making reports available. I'm sure that we can talk to our communications department with that invaluable information. And then we will come out with a plan that we'll be able to share showing how the process will move along.
Thanks, Joanne. So adding to that, I just wonder, just putting something together that Ms. White just brought up, if there are some community groups that are actively engaged and they would like to organize something themselves, would you make yourself available to, and that could be a good example of actually community-led project working collaboratively together in that way.
Yes, and thank you through you, Madam Chair. Yes, Councillor Doherty, that is something that we're absolutely looking at. Our consultant engaged or attempted to engage with a number of community groups while she was doing her work. And one of our targets is to ensure that we follow up with the individuals we originally consulted with also, so that they know what's happened with the process and with the information they were kind enough to provide to us and took time out of their busy schedules to allow us to gather. So for sure, we're going to be reaching far and wide to try and ensure that we're able to engage with as many individuals from a number of different sectors across, including business, community members, as many individuals as we possibly can. That's our goal.
Great, thanks.
Ms. Nordegraff, I saw your hand, and then I also saw Councillor Neal's following yours. If you'd like to go ahead.
I didn't mean to jump the queue, so if Ruth...
No, I'm good.
No. I hate the hand raise thing because sometimes you bump somebody out that's already had their hand up.
I'm keeping track. I'll keep it in order.
Couple of things. If it's my understanding from conversation, what I've heard tonight or today, is that Built for Zero Canada and Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, the city belongs to both those organizations and supports them. Good. There's also an American website or group called Community Solutions, and I've looked at their website, and it's got a lot of really strong suggestions. If I could ask Clerk Elizabeth if she would be able to get the websites for those three that I just mentioned, and I can send you an email afterwards and forward them to the committee. That would be very helpful, I think. So, the other question I had for the clerks, in a briefing, is there an opportunity for the committee chair to recognize the public if they have questions, or is that not part of our process? So that's probably for Elizabeth. Sorry.
Madam Chair, would you like me to respond?
Sure.
Okay, excellent. So thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Councillor Neal. At this time in briefings, it is only for members of the community in order to ask questions. However, The content of the briefing is part of the first business item, and it is at that time that members of the community are able to ask questions.
Great, I appreciate that. And I really appreciated Peter's earlier comments. I think one of the frustrations is sometimes we get a really good quantitative sharing of how many beds there are in the shelter system, what the percentage of usage is. The reality is that we have a fair number of people within the city that would rather live in the rough than go into a shelter or go to the hub, for instance. So I think that's something we need to grapple with that. And Peter's absolutely right. Sometimes we get caught up in those quantitative numbers and think that a solution has been found. And that's obviously not the case. I see Ruth has her hand up. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, and I am mindful of the time, but if I may, I just want to chime in here and say absolutely. And I think that's why we really wanted to bring forward as this first kind of more like qualitative piece, because we just don't want to, we are trying to listen and trying to respond. And before we jump into numbers and numbers of beds or numbers of next steps, then this seemed really important. I also would like to remind the committee and the members of the public that the homelessness system is a very, it is much broader than the shelter piece. As you can see in the report, the funding that we provide, and again, this is based on how we want to ideally not have people have to access the shelter. There's a lot of emphasis on prevention and diversion. And again, we've learned a lot of lessons there as well. Also, and you will see that the United Way, and I think it's important to mention it as well, has really taken on the lead of the youth homelessness piece. And that's another really important component, because if we don't start with younger people and prevent them from becoming homeless, that's ultimately a more, I think, better preventative way as well. So that's an important component. We have obviously still the housing first piece, the street outreach components. We have discretionary residency benefits that we disperse in the homeless prevention funds. We have damage funds, we have a hoarding coalition. So there's a lot of different components in the system that we're trying to piece together and make sure that it works well. So I know we do tend to kind of talk a lot about shelters, and it's definitely a really, really important part, but it's not the only part of the system that we're looking at.
Thank you very much.
Okay, were there any other questions from the committee? Okay, so then we'll conclude briefings and we'll move into business. So as I mentioned at the beginning, this briefing is sort of tied together with business item A, the homelessness system review draft recommendations and next steps. I'm not sure that, Ruth, that you have anything more to add to business item A, but if so, okay. So now for business item A, this is also where, again, committee members can ask questions. Also, this is where you can make comments as well, Councillor Hutchison. And if there are no other questions or comments, then we will open it up to the public for questions and comments. So I'll again pose it to our committee members. Okay, and Councillor Hutchison, I don't see your hand. Oh, sorry, Ms. White, I just saw your hand. Thank you.
I'm just trying to catch up here. Is this the section on the housing information on the buildings, etc., the actual housing component?
No, this
No?
is
that
the
the next
homelessness
one?
system review. This is that under number 7 business. It's item A.
Okay, so basically we've just spoken about the homeless and everything. Okay, no, it's the next one I want to talk about. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, so then I would like to open it up to the members of the public. So each member of the public will have 5 minutes to speak if anyone is interested in doing so. And then at the end is when all the questions will be answered for the end of, and that will happen for each business item. So this is just for business item A, if there's anyone from the public, and I will turn it over to Ms. Fawcett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just before, we do have some hands up, but just before I go to them, I'm just going to remind members of the public who are joining us this afternoon that we do rely on the raise hand function. So if you wish to speak during this time, please select the raise hand function, which you can find in the center of your screen when you move the mouse over the window. For those who are joining us by phone, you will need to press *9 in order to raise your hand to speak. So, Madam Chair, I'm going to go to the first individual, which is Tracy Mulvena, and I will ask her to unmute herself, please.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Well, my son was diagnosed with schizophrenia about 4 years ago. Because of his illness, he has difficulty living with other people, more so that people find it difficult to live with him and his schizophrenia. So this means he's unable to stay at a shelter. He's not able to rent a room because then again, he's with other people. And he's not even able to afford a bachelor apartment in Kingston. He's been on the housing wait list for almost 3 years now. Almost got booted off because they couldn't get a response from him through a letter, which was ridiculous. What plan is being made to build or expropriate so that my son can come out of the bush where he's living right now? Can I ask another question?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. I was reading through the strategy from, I think it's Dr. Carrie Fisher and the Beyond Living. I think it's a great strategy if it's put in place properly. And I think that is a real crisis. But our problem is that we don't even have enough housing to get people into in order to lay out that strategy of Beyond Living, because there just isn't any affordable housing. I mean, for my son who's ill, to be on a housing list for 3 years is unacceptable. It's, so I guess my question would be, has council or even spoken about or considered expropriation of buildings, of land? The Alcan plant has sat there empty for a number of years. Would be a good spot to build, some affordable housing. That's my question.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mulvena. And we'll come to answer your questions at the end of everyone's questions, but they're being documented. Thank you.
Madam Chair, next I'm going to ask Oliver Hill to speak, please.
Hi there, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome, thank you. So mine is a little bit of a comment and a little bit of a question. I just wanted to say thank you so much for bringing in the engagement piece and making sure that engaging people with lived experience is a part of reviewing the draft and going towards completion. And I think my question a little bit earlier was a bit answered with making sure that somebody is actually reviewing it and that there's an actual plan. Because at first I kind of didn't really understand if there was a concrete plan. There was just kind of words being said of, yes, we're going to engage. I'm glad that the communications department is doing that. It would just be really great to see like if there is a structured plan of what's going to be done kind of on paper or available somewhere, possibly online. And also just making sure that it's being reviewed for ethics because we have to remember that when we're engaging people with lived experience, especially experience of addictions and homelessness, that we're being very mindful of how we engage with them. And making sure that like we're engaging them properly and not in a way that is like taking something out of them, I guess. Also, I just wanted to highlight, I know that with working with Dr. Carrie and Marshall's study and everything and being part of that, we did kind of talk about the numbers and the like everything like that. I just wanted to put an emphasis on the quality of living, which goes a little bit into Tracy's comments of making sure that not only are we having housing, but we're having housing that's making sure that it's suitable for those people. And that's about everything. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, next on the list is Laura Moberly.
Laura, you're just muted currently. Sorry, Ms. Moberly, I just see the mute button on. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Perfect.
Oh, sorry, I think it has the wrong name.
It just comes up Laura Moberly.
Well, my name's actually Jessica. It just kept giving me a notification, so I assumed it was me. Anyways, my questions actually kind of tie into the last previous two, especially when it comes to mental illness, because I'm not sure, yeah, the quality of housing once you actually go through the wait list. I'm just curious what happens when the building's just not up to standard and what happens to the mental health at that point when this is supposed to be, they've already spent years waiting, like some people like Tracy mentioned 3 years, and he finally gets into a place where the building just has not, like, are there people, any sort of inspections to make sure that these buildings are up to standard before? Because it's to my understanding even that when you apply for housing, what it used to be is you kind of get 3 choices, and maybe it's because of COVID, I'm unsure. But right now it's the first unit you're offered, you need to take, or you kind of get put to the bottom of the list. So at that point, if you're offered a unit that is not up to standard, that, like, you know, could have bugs, could have like just general repairs, and you turn that housing down, you are basically choosing between just an infested building or remaining homeless for who knows how many other years. And I'm just curious, like, what are the standards? Like, are there any standards in place to make sure that these buildings are being upkept and they are actual proper living environments for these people?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry, if you had more to say, please continue.
Actually, it's just, well, I probably have a lot to say. I just don't really know where to start because I've experienced actually homelessness myself, and I've been through shelters, which also, in my experience with the shelter, they were not up to standard. Just to give a quick example, at the time, there were only 5 people staying at the shelter I was at. And normally they had at least 20 people with children. There was one instance where it was just so incredibly hot. And in the morning, I had been asked like how I slept, and I told them it was a bit toasty. And long story short, they had left the oven on all night. And it blew my mind that it's like, this is how like a full like organization meant to deal with this sort of thing, like with like full staff only dealing with 5 people at the time as opposed to 20. And someone just left the oven on all night. Like, I don't even know how those things sort of happened. So in relation to housing too, it's like a lot of the things in place already, in my experience, they're already not up to standard, and it doesn't appear that anybody is really making sure of this. And then people kind of just get put into these positions and they have to deal with it themselves, especially when it comes to mental illness. The whole point is, you're trying to get better and you don't even have that opportunity because now you're dealing with like all of these other problems that shouldn't have existed in the first place. So I guess, yeah, that's all I have to say for now. But thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate that.
Madam Chair, we do still have one hand raised. However, it is Ms. Malvena who had already spoken previously. I will leave it up to you whether or not you would allow her to speak a second time.
Yes, please.
All right, Tracy, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. So I guess this is a little bit towards Jessica's question, but does the Board of Health audit Kingston housing units? Yeah, that would just be my question. Does the Board of Health audit the Kingston housing units? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Was there anyone else from the public, Ms. Fawcett?
At this time, Madam Chair, I don't see any hands. Perhaps we could do a last call. If there's anyone else who wishes to speak to business item A, please raise your hand now in Zoom. There are no further hands, Madam Chair.
Perfect. So then I will hand this over to our staff members. Ms. Nordegraff, if you wanted to begin by responding.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, I will also ask Mitchell and Joanne, who also will be able to answer a few of these questions. First of all, regarding the question from Ms. Malvena, first of all, I'm very sorry to hear about the situation. We are making some updates in how we are managing our social housing wait list. And how we are working with clients, because we are aware that the system that we rolled out 20 years ago, legislated by the province with a very administrative kind of approach, is not working anymore, or it is not working the way it should be working. So we are definitely making improvements in how we reach clients, how we update information, and how we make sure that we're not have these kind of circumstances happen to clients because they didn't receive a letter. So I just wanted to follow up on that. I mean, the piece around the availability of sufficient housing for individuals with any mental health challenges is certainly a very concerning situation. I know we as a city are doing our best to add more supportive housing solutions, but it also certainly is something that we need to do in partnership with, for instance, our partners at Addictions and Mental Health, Anguanada, and other agencies. We definitely know that there's more needs than current supply. And I know with, for instance, Addictions and Mental Health, who recently opened the Lion Street building, that unfortunately is just a first, drip or a drip in the buckets. There's definitely much more need. So as much as we as a municipality are trying to be a solution focused, we're also really pushing the provincial governments to help us here, because that really also goes back to the need for sufficient supports for individuals in more supportive housing and individuals with supports or that need supports. On the question about kind of expropriation, what I will say is I cannot speak for council, but as a city and as council has identified a clear priority to add more affordable housing units. Council has identified this in their priority, and we are working on, for instance, the addition of 128 affordable or 128 units, 90 affordable units on 1316 Princess Streets. We are working on a project, obviously the supportive housing unit building on Lower Union. We've purchased a building in the West End. So there are lots of, and there's many more projects that are moving forward. But it definitely is not a very fast-paced process, and we know that the amount of people in poor housing need is much greater than the amount of units that we're building. So I know we're continuing to work on this. We recently also added another staff to the corporation that is specifically focusing on working on housing projects and getting them kind of finished. So I know this is not the answer to your specific situation, unfortunately, but there's definitely a lot of work happening to do what we can within our municipal government's power. The question around the plan online and the ethics. So we will certainly make sure that all the information will be available online and also in print form for those that do not have access to that. And very clear kind of overview of what's happening next, what people are looking at, and how we would like to invite people for feedback. Great question around ethics. The agents or the ORCode group that we're working with is very familiar and very experienced in ethics, so that's certainly on the radar. And also the overall kind of community engagement piece as well. The question around quality of housing, I know that that's a really big one too. There are a couple of things that we have in place. We obviously have things like property standards that could come and help. We have done some work, but we continue to do work on tenant education as well to really make sure, again, as a community, not just Joanne, Mitch, and I, but just as a community, making sure people know how to advocate for their rights. I recognize that that's not always an easy process, but that's something that we definitely have been trying to do more of with kind of general information sharing. I also will say that we do, as a city, are the service manager for the social housing project. So we do have that ability to have that have conversations, obviously, with the providers that are funded. But I will, I think with that, move it over to Mr. Grange to jump in on a few of the questions around social housing and quality of housing as well.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you, Ms. Malvena, and as well, Jessica, for the questions, and through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Ruth did touch on quite a bit, which is great, so thank you. In terms of quality of the units, certainly under the social housing portfolio, we as service manager are the funder, as Ruth indicated. And we hold the providers accountable, certainly through operational reviews, where we will go in periodically to inspect units, inspect their finances, governance, the way they perform the rent calculations to ensure everything's in line with the legislation that we're to follow. In terms of a health board or some sort of health agency going into units, I'm fairly certain there isn't an agency that does that, aside from the tenants knowing their rights and being able to connect with property standards to go in and inspect the unit if they have any sort of concerns. In terms of the centralized waiting list, and Ruth touched on this, yes, unfortunately, there's a long list. We don't have we are mandated to hold and have 2003 RGI units available as service manager through various social housing providers. We've also introduced locally portable housing benefits, which are somewhat unique to our area, as other service managers have them, but we are putting them through legislation to follow the Housing Services Act, which assists in drawing down the numbers on our wait list. So that's a new option. The refusals were not anything done at the local level. The refusals were part, so the history, you're correct, in social housing was each individual was allowed to select units within their application process, and they were allowed 3 opportunities to find housing. And on their 3rd refusal, if they refuse that, their application would be canceled. So I believe it was July of last year that the changes took place at the provincial level, which were for all service managers to follow, to implement it locally, that all applicants are only offered 1 refusal, sorry, 1 opportunity for housing. And if they refuse that, they're taken off the wait list. That is something that we can advocate back to the province to change, but it's something that we're obligated to follow as service manager. And finally, sorry, I believe it was touched on what type of supports are in place. We're currently working through a pilot project with Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation to provide support services in-house to their tenants, to assist with mental health supports, to assist with prevention of evictions and assistance at the landlord-tenant board. That is a pilot project that we have funding towards now, and depending on the outcomes, and we have monthly reporting on outcomes, excuse me, and depending on the outcome of that program, we do hope, and the intent would be to roll that out to all of our social housing providers to support all tenants through that lens. So again, I'm not sure it's an immediate resolution to the questions you have posed, but that's just kind of some background as to why some processes are the way they are. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that did cover all of the questions. So we will move forward to business item B, Housing and Homelessness Committee Standing Update Report. And I will pass the mic to Ms. Nordegraff.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. This is the second time that I believe that we are providing this update report. Again, just making sure that we are sharing updates on all the different kind of components of the work that we do. I'm happy to pass it over to Mr. Grange and Ms. Boris for additional content, or given kind of the time, I'm also happy to just take any questions that you might have. And I know there were a few, but again, this is really just meant to give you a full scope of all the different initiatives and the work that's happening within kind of the realm of the full housing and homelessness system that we work on as a service manager.
Thank you. I'm not sure, this had been a report that was submitted in advance. I'm not sure if there is anything that Mr. Granger or Ms. Boris would like to add.
Sorry, Mitch, I think
No, it's okay. I was just going to add, if it's helpful, just to talk through the report. We're certainly happy to do that. We can, if everyone's in agreement, I'm sure, Joanne, if you wouldn't mind speaking through the first section of the report, speaking of homelessness, I can touch on the community housing and the affordable housing piece and some of our affordable housing programming, just to give you an update if that's beneficial to the group. Otherwise, we can just answer questions. So, yeah, yeah, I'll leave it at that. If you'd like us to go ahead, please just let us know and we can give you an overview.
I think if there are some key points that you can do for an overview, that might be great and helpful just to bring everybody up to speed on the committee as well as the public for questions.
So thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, I can begin with some of the homelessness aspects at this point. I know it's a very long report, so I'm not going to go through and read it all. I'm sure you've all had an opportunity to. But what we've really tried to capture here is enough information to give you a really good update on what the landscape looks like within our service provision at this time. So we talk about and begin with the emergency, we begin with data management. As we've alluded to, we recognize the need to be able to access data at this point in time. It provides us with a wealth of information and can help us look at what services and supports are being utilized. It is also a mandate for us to be able to provide really good and robust data, and that is part of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. That is actually part of their mandate with us through the by name list. That's how we achieve quality. So we provide data reports to them on a monthly basis with some of the information that you can find within this report itself. And we have an advisor that we work with on a monthly basis to look at that data and then to assist us in being able to not only understand the trends, but to help us come up with suggestions as to how we might work with our service providers towards ending chronic homelessness and what type of little changes we might be able to make, and some monumental changes that would be beneficial through the data that we're looking at. So we continue to ensure that we have our by name list up to date, and we're working with our HIFA system and ensuring that service providers are putting as much information as they can into our systems. Our ongoing pandemic response is something that I'm incredibly proud of the service providers within this community for really taking charge of and ensuring that we haven't had any COVID outbreaks within our shelter systems. I think we're one of the only communities in Canada that has not. So they've done a phenomenal job and continue to do so in screening clients and assisting them in accessing supports to get tested should they feel they're symptomatic around COVID, and to have somewhere to isolate as they await test results. AMHS has been running for us an isolation center for that purpose and have done a phenomenal job in keeping clients safe as we've navigated through COVID. The response is still ongoing. We're not out of the woods just yet, but we are seeing numbers significantly decrease with respect to demand for those programs and services also. Our emergency shelters have been, as we've reported on multiple occasions, have been impacted by COVID and isolation or self-distancing requirements. So our monthly occupancy from March to May 2021 is that In From the Cold has been at 86%. Lily's Place, which is our family shelter, has been at 100% occupancy. And the Kingston Youth Shelter, although it states they're 69, I can confirm that they are at full capacity at this point in time. So we provided some statistics there to help understand sort of what the situation at the shelters looks like. The shelters continue to work with their IPAC teams so that if and when they're able to open up more beds, they're doing so in a safe manner for clients and all staff. When it comes to prevention and diversion supports and services, there have been no updates or changes since the last report. So services continue and again are one of the most important aspects of our homeless system. Prevention and diversion is our program to assist individuals who reach out with imminent threat of becoming homeless. And workers work through them in an attempt to try and ensure that they don't become homeless. So those are our prevention and diversion supports. Our homelessness prevention fund and discretionary residency benefit, we touched on those a little bit previously as well, but we're still seeing a good uptake in individuals accessing these funds to be able to assist them with items such as rent arrears, moving costs, any type of assistance that they might need individually that will hopefully prevent them from becoming homeless or assist them in moving into new housing should they be able to access that. Our Housing First continues to target chronically homeless individuals. There's 107 households receiving services in our Housing First program currently, and 33 on the wait lists. What we're able to tell from our data analysis that 90% of our adult-led households and 100% of our youth-led households have been assessed at high acuity, which means there's a multitude of challenges and barriers that are both preventing them from finding and or maintaining housing support. So what that means is that we're working with a very challenging population and continue to do so with good success. There have been a number of individuals housed each month, even though they need full support from their Housing First workers in order to try and maintain that housing. Street outreach continues to provide services and supports to individuals in the community who are unhoused. During the last council meeting, council approved that street outreach move from 5 to 7 days a week, which is a really good move. And that street outreach is out on the streets on Saturdays and Sundays as well. They were not previously, and have been able to add another staff member to that team in order to be able to assist those that are living rough and being able to assist them in knowing what services and supports are out there. The Integrated Care Hub is pretty much full all of the time. One of the nice things that I draw your attention to is their healthcare diversion stats. So on a monthly basis, the ICH is collecting a lot of data so that we can see how many individuals who access care and services there actually don't have to go to hospital, that if that service was not in the community, they would be sent to hospital, potentially corrections, the mental health section of the hospital, paramedics would be involved, all of those pieces. So we're able to gather and be able to provide that data to you because they're doing incredible things apart from just saving lives. They're actually really taking a lot of the pressure off our hospital systems and our primary care resources on site. Unless anybody has any other major or questions around that, we can go to Mitch so that he can go through the social housing updates at this point in time. I'm not sure how you wish to do that, Madam Chair.
I think we should have Mitch speak and then we'll go through questions just following both of you. Thank you so much, Joanne, for that, for those highlights.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair. So with social housing programming, one great update is that we've been able to allocate $679,000 to our supporter. Sorry, $679,000 to our community housing, social housing providers to complete vital capital repairs to their buildings. This is through the Canada-Ontario Community Housing Initiative. This is round 3 of being able to do that to our providers. You know, they are aging social housing stock, which were created back in the 80s, 90s. So repairs are needed. In the past, they've been really, these programs have been specific to energy efficiency. However, this type of programming is not. So you're able to address things like in the rural setting, or Frontenac are able to address, you know, septic problems or foundation issues. So it's a really welcome program, and we're entering agreements with them in the coming weeks. I did speak on the tenant support services program that KFHC are piloting. That's really the direct assessment and intervention services for clients and mental health supports, which we hope to roll out to the larger social housing community. The centralized waiting list, we have touched on that today. Again, currently the numbers, well, the numbers at the end of April were, there were 1,148 people on the wait list, 22 of those being special priority, being victims of domestic violence or human trafficking. And 214 of those were actually currently housed in RGI in subsidized housing, waiting for an internal transfer. Well, another big undertaking that we've been going through for the past year or so has been the merger of Townhomes Kingston with Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation. We are at a point now where the business case and approvals are into the Ontario government, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. and we'll be seeking approval of that on July 1st. So what that means is 2 or 3 years ago, Townhomes Kingston, or Kingston Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corp, were identified as what's called a project in difficulty under the Housing Services Act, where Kingston Frontline Housing then took over their programming for administrative purposes and maintenance-related issues. And the city have been working in conjunction with them and external legal and a kind of an internal working group to make the amalgamation of the merger happen. We're at a point where that is set to take place, and certainly there'll be no adverse impacts to tenants. It'll be a seamless transition. There's been a lot of communication, documentation provided, and a lot of savings too and efficiencies found throughout the process. We're also undertaking, we understand that there is concern with arrears in the private sector, nonprofit sector, due to the pandemic. So what we have recently done is partnered with private sector developers and landlords to issue a survey just to get a sense of what they see. What are they seeing in elevated arrears? What's their plan on if they have arrears? Do they enter into repayment plans? What do they forecast? We're waiting for the results back of those surveys to determine what we can do as a municipality, and determination if there could be a rent bank, or how we can use some of our existing programming, like the discretionary residency benefit or the homelessness prevention fund, to assist with some of those arrears. The ongoing affordable housing projects and initiatives. There is a table in the document which I can just touch on briefly. So we do have 6 ongoing projects at various stages of development. 27 Wright Crescent is a development of 40 units, 23 being 40 units, 23 being a mix of affordable and RGI. Currently under construction at 27 Wright Crescent, set for occupancy, I believe, later this year or early into next year. Our director had touched on 1316 Princess Street, and there'll be a creation of 90 affordable units there with direction from council. It's currently in the land use planning approvals process and is ongoing, and that's a partnership between Kingston Frontline Housing Corporation and Kingston Cooperative Homes. Kingston Home-Based Housing, the property listed are at 44 Albert Street, currently where the location is, and they're proposing supportive and transitional housing for youth, and they're currently again in the land use planning aspect of that. There's a development at 1752 Bath Road with AMR Construction Company, 28, again, affordable housing units with supportive housing attached to those. Recent council approval of 113 Lower Union Street with Indigenous supportive housing going into that with up to 19 beds. And we have the site recently purchased at 805 Woodby Drive with 34 beds, which is currently being used as a temporary space for the Kingston Youth Shelter. But we do intend to find a long-term operator for the site to manage that facility. Just a couple, not really update, just for everyone's information. We do have some affordable housing programs that are always ongoing. Kingston Frontline Renovates program, where we assist homeowners with capital repairs to their homes up to $10,000 and $5,000 in the form of an accessible grant, or grant for accessibility purposes. With the home ownership program, where we provide up to 10% down payment of a home for a 20-year affordability period. So those programs are open and still seeking applications, as well as the secondary residential unit affordable housing grant program, so secondary suites. There are quite a good uptake of secondary suites within the city, but our program we have that offers affordable secondary suites and incentives to homeowners and developers to create the units. There's a low uptake, so that's still ongoing, and we ideas on how to create better incentives to get a better take up of that program. We're currently sitting around a supportive and transitional housing roundtable with other community members. So again, communication, engaging partnerships with members, that's ongoing. United Way have provided a Pathway Home Kingston, which is bringing awareness to homelessness as a whole across the community. And sorry, I feel like I'm just rambling on now. I believe that's all the updates from the housing side of things in the report. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. It's a big document, so it's great just to have some of the highlights to be able to refresh us here today. So I know, Ms. White, I will go to you first. I know you had mentioned previously, oh, and I see you have the hand up as well. So we'll go to you first, and then if we can have the rest of the committee members, if you have any questions, if you can be prepared when Ms. White has had a chance to review hers.
Okay, thank you so much. Little bit difficult to hear because it went in and out, but I kind of got the gist, I believe. One of the two of the things I have, it's in regards to the heights, the regeneration. The paragraph states that the part of the last paragraph, sorry. Primary objective of the heights regeneration to improve the neighborhood's design and to reduce the concentration of rent geared to income housing. Now, apparently this is supposed to be ongoing, moving forward. How many people actually live in that area that are on geared to income? How are they going to be rehoused when this second phase happens? And are they going to be able to move back from once it's all been beautified and made to look wonderful? Are all the people who've got money going to move and take it over, and the people who are geared to income going to get pushed out again? And the other question I had, which I can't seem to find, when you use the term affordable, now there's rent geared to income, what is affordable in the eyes of, I don't know, the province, the city? Is it the $300 or $400 that people get when they're on OW or ODSP, or are they still going to have to use all of their living just to pay rent? Those are my couple of questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I can field those. Thank you, Ms. White, for your question. Through you, Madam Chair. And I apologize about my audio. I hope it's coming through. In terms of Rideau Heights regeneration, phase one of Rideau Heights regeneration was the revitalization of Shannon Park and the decommission of Daly Street. So when Daly Street was decommissioned, at that time, there was no adverse impacts to any of the tenants residing in that building, 30 RGI units. So they were offered an additional space within the KFHC portfolio. Some stayed in the north end, others went to more centralized location within the portfolio. So again, here with phase two is really just looking at, and it's still years away from this happening, but it's just a few townhouses involved in phase two of the regeneration. But at that time, there'll be no adverse impacts to clients. So the tenants they'll be offered alternative housing opportunities or solutions in order for those buildings to come down. What's happening as well as that is that there'll be a new public street going through and the introduction of private lanes to allow for better access to homes and communities. So getting better lighting, getting better programming. We have the Rideau Heights Community Center there now in the library. It's a very long process. Phase two is coming, but there'll be no, as I've said a few times now, the tenants are the priority, and they'll be taken care of and offered alternative housing options. I hope that addresses your question relating to that. In terms of affordable, what's the definition of affordable? The definition of affordable in terms of programming that we administer from the federal and provincial government is 80% of average market rent of CMHC's average market rents. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but 80% of what a current average market rent for one bedroom would be considered affordable. And that could go down depending on the level of funding or the plan that's put in front of us in terms of the pro forma of the development. It could be 60%, 80%. And then the deepest level of affordability, of course, is RGI or subsidized housing. I hope that addresses your question.
Okay. Was there anyone else from our committee who had questions? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through that, Madam Chair. But that was an important question because we know 80% people can't afford that, and staff recognize that, and it speaks to the fact that a large problem with that we're trying to solve is that people simply do not have enough money. The social services and social support from the provincial government is just not enough. And that brings me to the question. It was already raised that new legislation has come down the line, which means that people can't refuse a unit. If they refuse a unit, they're off the list. And that just illustrates how, even with our best efforts, sometimes we're hamstrung by provincial legislation. And one example of that, and I wonder if staff could speak to that, because that was really surprising to me when I first learned about that, is that on the list for social housing, that homelessness is not a priority. It sounds so counterintuitive, and I couldn't believe it when I first heard that. But again, that was a legislation that was handed down to us and that we have to deal with. So I wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Doherty, and through you, Madam Chair. Yes, so as service manager, we are obligated to have a special priority status, and that's where our obligation ends. So anything that we include in addition to that in terms of urgent priority is a local choice. Prior to the launching, kind of the revamp of our homelessness services and our housing first approach, there was a homelessness priority in place where 1 in every 10 offerings of the centralized waiting list was offered to an individual who was homeless. That was decided to be taken away at that point when our homelessness services were revamped. However, we are currently engaging with other municipalities to see how we may be able to introduce that back. I think the policy that was in place many years ago was not effective. So I think finding the proper way to bring that priority back is something that we are entertaining, and we're engaging with other municipalities who have a homeless priority in place to see what may be the best practice for us to implement at the local level.
Thanks for that. So I actually misunderstood. So what you're saying, it wasn't a provincial legislation, it was actually this choice by the city to take homelessness off as a priority, and that was done a while back. When did that decision, when was that made?
I believe, sorry, Ruth may have the exact date. It was when we kind of took the housing first approach into place. I want to say it was around 2012, 2013, in that range. I don't have the exact date though, sorry.
No, I was going to chime in to say we're happy to find out for you, Councillor Dorothy, and get back to you.
You're just on mute, Councillor Doherty.
Sorry. Yeah, not just the date, but also the rationale. Like, why was that decision made? What led to that decision?
Through you, Madam Chair, just to to chime in on that again, and we'll follow up with some additional information to the committee. But the rationale at that point was really based on the implementation of the Housing First program. So that would allow for the kind of opportunity for clients to actually access housing through that program rather than, or not rather than, but as a complementary kind of support system. So again, it was really to kind of focus on kind of the supports that are needed to house individuals after accessing the shelter services, but happy to get some of the kind of rationale and timelines on that back to the committee for review as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Are there other questions from our committee? Councillor Hutchison, please go ahead.
Thanks very much. I've got 2 or 3 questions actually. Regarding the utilization ratings and the capacity ratings in this section, the utilization rates have gone way up in the last in January to April 2021, I believe it is. I didn't write it down, but I'm pretty sure that's it. The question is why? We've had COVID for a year and a third at least. So, and that's going to lead to a question about what is considered capacity. Because we know from other forms of utilization of different systems that capacity actually occurs before you get to 100%. Because you start pushing people out or redirecting them and systems don't operate at 100%. So the first question I have is, why is those really high utilization rates? I mean, I think for Lily's Place was 115%. Why is that occurring?
That's a really good question. The trend that we've been able to see is that the families are of larger composition. That's why the shelter was filling up more quickly at Lily's Place. We had a number of very large families, in excess of about 6 or 7 family members per family unit. And with the current makeup of Lily's Place shelter, that meant that 2 families could stay in shelter and the other families had to sort of be relocated to a motel until space became available at the shelter. Those families were struggling with finances and evictions, and so came to shelter. And very likely the family shelter has always been at capacity. That's not something that's unusual for this system. Unfortunately, it's one of the greater used shelter systems within the city, and actually province-wide family shelters tend to be full ongoing. Other reasons that the other shelters have been going up in capacity, I mean, it can have anything to do with weather, to the encampment protocol being put into place, to a number of different variables. But, you know, it really depends on whether or not individuals are interested in accessing services and supports at any given time as to whether or not they will access those services. So it's a combination of a number of different factors, but specifically for Lily's, it has been large scale family units in place.
Okay. I noticed Ms. Norgard has Murdogoff has a hand up.
So just to quickly add to Ms. Boris's comments, I also would like to share that this is certainly the capacity piece, and a number of beds is something that we, on the quantitative piece of the system review, that is also a really important question, which again, I will be very frank, I think the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic moving forward will certainly be something that we have to be very mindful of. So I think having a better way of measuring and understanding through the by name list, I think we are better equipped to be nimble. But I also think, and we see this again, Kingston is not unique. We see quite an increase in needs and kind of across the province, across the country. So it's definitely something that we are trying to respond to it as much as we can as a system.
Okay. All right, I'll look forward to the further information. I do think some thought should be given to what is the nature of full capacity, because systems don't operate just as we would have them do on a piece of paper. So, so I thank you for those comments, because I'm mostly interested in the entire system. Lily's place was just the most egregious case, okay? And I noticed you're using hotels, and I know that's part of the overflow. A couple of times I've been asking since last year, Councillor Neil brought this up tangentially to one of his other questions, and that is the number of people who do not want to be sheltered, either permanently or otherwise. And I know the last time I talked to staff about this, which I think was probably a couple of months ago, the answer was, we don't really know, and we're working on it. So do we have any updated information on quantifying that issue, that problem? So, because obviously it's related to my first question. So I see Ms. Boris has her hand up.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hutchinson, and through you, Madam Chair. Street outreach actively asks individuals when they go and offer services and support. And I know that nobody likes to hear this, but some people just choose to camp. That's the type of lifestyle they wish to have. And no matter what we offer other than keys to an apartment, they don't want to access the services and supports in place. We've heard from some clients, they don't like the atmosphere within shelters. There might be someone staying there that they know that they don't want to be in the same vicinity as. We hear from some individuals that they don't necessarily want to find an apartment or a room at this stage. There's a multitude of answers depending on every single individual you ask, because it is a really individual choice for each person as to what route they take within the homeless services system or choose not to. And so I think that that's part of the challenge for all service providers, for our street outreach, and for us as staff, is that, you know, we try to get an answer from each person, but to meet each person's needs specifically is really, really difficult. So we try to find a common ground where we can support as many individuals as possible, with a number of different spaces rather than 200 different spaces. So it can be really difficult, but clients will share with street outreach, and we're collecting that information anecdotally, so that we're able to provide that information to those who ask. And again, you know, we've got people coming from out of community who tell us that they might be looking to move back to their home community, people who tell us they're actively moving and they do their own movement and traversing through the year. So there's a number of different reasons that people choose not to use shelter. Sometimes they are still afraid of COVID. Some people really, truly don't like the shelter settings themselves.
And certainly there's many complex issues as well, like addictions and mental health issues that will also lead to that choice.
Right. Okay, that's a fair comment at the end from Ms. Kohler. So that question leads to my next question, which has to do with the Housing First section. That is, that indicates that we have 107 households receiving service, which is good. And 33 on the wait list, meaning we can't, I presume that means we can't service them. We don't have a place to put them. Now, if there's 206 people on the by name list, which is our best estimate, right? Not necessarily, we don't know how accurate, but probably fairly accurate. What is the shortfall? Is the shortfall 206 minus 107? Which would mean we're basically dealing with half, okay? 107 being about a half of 206. Now, we then have the group, like this is the way I think we have to deal with this. We have to peel it back like an onion. We have the group that have been 10 years out there and they don't want the place. That's why it's necessary to get a number so we can get a grip on the problem, right? And just how short are we and where are we short, right? And so that's my question. Is the nature of the shortfall 206 minus 107 as is served by Housing First?
Well, Housing First is just a program. So in reality, we still have 200 homeless individuals within the city of Kingston, however you look at that. We're serving technically all of them as street outreach visits, almost everybody who's living unsheltered to some capacity on a daily basis. And then those that are involved in systems have supports. So the individuals who are in the Housing First program could be staying in a multitude of places, not even just necessarily shelters. They might be couch surfing, they might be staying with friends, but their ultimate goal is to find housing. So Housing First supports are offered to anyone who wishes to accept them and go through the process of going through an intake and working with a worker in the Housing First team. But really, at the end of the day, we have 200 homeless individuals accessing services and supports, just different services and supports throughout the system. So the offer of Housing First is made to everybody, but as you would see to date, that's the uptake. And the reason that there's a shortfall is because the case managers can only work and provide good care and support to a certain number of individuals on a caseload at any given time. Given that there's a bottleneck in finding housing for individuals and the difficulty in accessing safe and affordable housing, there's a lot of extra work that goes into assisting each individual on a Housing First caseload. So as soon as someone's housed, it doesn't mean that we can just automatically add someone else to that list. That means that the wraparound supports start with that individual also. So really it's a filtering through process for people. But at the end of the day, the by name list numbers are those that do not have permanent housing. That helps.
Okay, I just want to be really clear about this. The 107 people are in quote unquote permanent housing, not a shelter.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think there's some confusion. No, we have the by name list has all homeless people.
Yes, no, I get
107
that.
people who are on the Housing First caseload may be in different positions. So there's some that are just beginning their journey and looking and locating housing with their case managers. There's some who are housed and are getting wraparound services and supports because Housing First doesn't just house people. They stay with them for up to 6 or 12 months, depending on that individual's needs.
So I would suggest that this committee needs to know how that breaks down. Okay, like I think that's pretty fundamental. Like how many are actually being, because the idea of Housing First is you house the person, then you give them the wraparound supports. I totally support that because we all know all the problems, as Ms. Collier referenced part of it herself. And so if I had those numbers, I wouldn't have to ask the question. So it's all part of peeling the onion. That's what I would say. So I'm just going to move on here. I don't want to take up too much time. The ICH, we can just hang on one sec while I scroll down to, I find that section. Handhold there. So, as you know, in my district, we deal with everything to do with the ICH. And I want to know if it is going to be quantifiably, and this goes back to the general comment by Mr. Clark, want to know if it's going to be quantifiably and qualifiedly evaluated by a third party at the end of this, before the end of this year. Like, how effective is it? I hope it's really effective, but you know, we're talking there about the number of hospital visits avoided and all that. And sure, that's true, but I also get multiple reports about ambulances and fire and police attending. So that raises the question whether money is actually being saved or not. Now, that doesn't mean it's not a good service, but it's important to know what we're achieving and what we're not achieving. You know, there may well be a good qualifiable reasons for having the ICH, regardless of the monies otherwise being saved or not. So I want to know if that's going to be evaluated and not by the people running it. Anybody going to answer that? Oh, see Mrs. Nordegraf.
Thank you for that question, and to you, Madam Chair. We're certainly, and I think there are many different agencies involved with the Integrated Care Hub, in addition to HARS and KCHC, who are kind of in the building day and night. We are gathering, to your point, a lot of different information, both directly from HARS, from the CTS, also from other agencies that have staff there. We are also, to your point, tracking, for instance, the EMS data and other pieces. So there is a lot of information that we're gathering. We are just in the kind of beginning stages of trying to, and I think because there are so many different agencies involved, have a more integrated way of capturing data, because every agency will capture their own data, and it's also then how all of that would come together. So to your question, if there will be an external evaluation, I will be honest, I don't have an answer for that right now. We are certainly, as a system, as a funder, trying to evaluate, but I think there's many different agencies involved in this, including Providence Care, Addictions and Mental Health, Kingston Police. As you know, this is not a very straightforward process to have the pros and cons of this service. So I think what I will say is I would be happy to take that request back. We obviously at some point will need to have a conversation, and we are having conversations about the longer term impact. I will be honest that right now, we are also still on the reality of a quite significant drug poisoning crisis. I'm sure we all hear stories, not just in Kingston, but across the country of this and the impacts. We also have a lot of other services that are not available yet right now, that a lot of clients have been accessing because they're still closed. So that's a very long-winded answer to say, let me take that back, and definitely would like to. I know we will come back on the Integrated Care Hub to council on kind of obviously the future, regardless. So I think that's a really important question to raise.
Thank you very much, and for doing that. And please understand, I want this to be successful. But I also recognize from different things I've read just how difficult it is to make this work. And also there's huge problems in the neighborhood, okay, just ongoing every day. And then I heard today about people with addictions feeling they're not being helped. Now, people who have addictions and maybe mental health issues and are homeless, their assessments of what is actually someone trying to help them or whatever's going on has got to be taken with some advisement, right? So I'm not saying it's true, but it's all part of the puzzle. And so I just wanted to raise that. And finally, I have one comment, if I may, Ms. Collier, the chair, and that is, there's lots of programming things and services questions that could be asked, and some really good questions being asked here today. The bottom line is this: show me the money. 25 years, all levels of government have not been investing in this the way they should have. And that's why with homelessness, I was part of the in housing administration for a long time. And they were told in the 90s, you cut these programs, you will see homelessness grow. So no surprise. And that's really unfortunate for the people involved and the neighborhoods in which these services are located sometimes, however good those services may be. Okay, I just wanted to say that. Keep asking that question. Who's going to cough up the money?
Thank you, Councillor Hutchison. Is there anyone else from our committee who would like to speak? Questions or comments? Okay, I would. I don't have a question. I do just have a quick comment, which is through my staff at Habitat for Humanity, I've heard we have been getting, probably only within the last month, but we have been getting routine calls, maybe up to 5 a week, from families. Typically, it's a single parent with children, and they are looking for immediate housing. They're currently housed, they're renting, but they are facing evictions. Typically because the landlord is selling the property. So I think we're going to start to see this a little more often. They're having a hard time finding housing, just full stop. And then second, finding housing that they can afford. There are major logs at the LTB, at the Landlord and Tenant Board, which is causing serious problems for tenants as well as landlords, and that whole situation where there's really not that's not properly being serviced, that is going to have, I think, an even greater impact going forward. It has previously, but even going forward. Anyway, this is just a comment, as I know that isn't necessarily something that our city staff would deal with. If anything, maybe advocacy, but that would be it. But it is a growing problem, and I think that we'll come to find that we have new numbers. I wasn't surprised to see the numbers for Lily's Place, and I hope very much that this is averted in the coming months. The continuation. Ruth Nordergraff, please. Oh, sorry, you're muted, Ruth.
Sorry. Thank you. And certainly it's definitely something we are, I think, all quite concerned about. And I know Mr. Grange alluded to the rent arrears survey that we're doing, because that's another really important piece. So not only do we definitely see more private landlords, and as a community, we have quite a large secondary market with rentals, and there's definitely a trend or we're definitely seeing this happen quite a bit. So it's quite concerning, and I know, again, we're trying what we can as a municipal government, but it's also something that I think again requires a much larger funding conversation, as per Councillor Hutchison's comments as well.
Thank you. And I will just take a minute to say I am aware of the work that's being done right now and looking into this, sort of those steps to try and help with rent arrears, or to evaluate that situation. And I really commend our city staff for the work they're doing on that and being proactive in that in advance. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so if there are not any further comments or questions from our committee members, then I would like to open it up to the public, and I will turn it over to Elizabeth to facilitate that. I don't see members of the public, just for the record. I only see our staff members as well as our committee members.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I'm just going to remind members of the public who are with us this afternoon, if they'd like to speak during this business item, they will need to raise their hand in Zoom. Again, this can be located in the center of the Zoom window when you move your cursor over the window. And Madam Chair, there's currently no hands up. I'm just going to give a couple of seconds in case anyone's still reaching for the raise hand function. And I do believe we have one here. And Madam Chair, I'm going to ask Ms. Malvena if she would like to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think this was just in a reply to Joanne Boris. She was saying that the street outreach will go around and you know, I do want to say that although with my son being schizophrenic, he did attempt to go to the ICH, and he said twice people came at him to stab him. He said they had they had screwdrivers. He said they pulled back their jacket. So you know this choice of you know, wanting to be homeless or wanting, perhaps it is true with some of them. I know my son desperately wants to be housed, but he does not feel safe going to the shelters. And as I said, you know, before that, he has rented a room. He's gotten kicked out either for cleaning too much, yes, because you know, to him cleanliness is close to godliness, and that's part of his delusions. And so it just never works out. So you know, I guess I was just a little shocked when I heard that, and I just want to be clear that there's many that, even though they're out in the bush, they're out in the forest, they don't want to be there. They have no choice. He doesn't even, you know, to rent a room is not an option. There's absolutely nothing there that he can afford on his ODSP. And I mean, yes, he is delusional. He's also on a community treatment order, which took 10 years to get. But this isn't fair. I mean, we wouldn't let someone with Alzheimer's walk around the streets. You know, we wouldn't let sick people walk around the street, yet that's what Kingston is doing. That's exactly what they're doing. He's been on this housing list for almost 3 years now, almost got off the housing list because of some piece of paper that he never got. And the only reason I found out about it is because when I did receive a second piece of paper to my address, it said that he was taken off this list. I believe I spoke to Joanne and I sent an email because I couldn't believe. And if this happens to my son, how many other people does this happen to? And that don't have someone to advocate for them and look out for them. So it's not really a question, but it's a statement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mulvena, for your advocacy for your son and for everyone. Elizabeth, was there any other members of the public?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are no further hands at this time.
Okay, perfect. So we will then move into business item C. We're making good progress. And business item C is my report, the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee 2020 report card. And I'm thrilled to see nobody has any questions. Perfect. Moving on. Just kidding. It's a short report. It's a short report card. I saw Andy. I saw. No. Okay. Did we have any questions from our committee? Going once, going twice. Perfect. And Elizabeth, I will go back to you if there are any questions or comments from the public with us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to give a couple seconds in case there are members of the public who do have questions about this report to raise their hands. And there doesn't appear to be at this time, Madam Chair.
Excellent. Okay, so we will now move into business item D, which is our last business item on our.
Sorry, Madam Chair, before we move forward, perhaps if we could just put the motion on the floor and vote to accept the report card, please.
Oh, my apologies. I thought that it was just sent in, but I do see the recommendation. So I'll go ahead and read this. That the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee recommend to the Arts, Recreation and Community Policies Committee that the 2020 Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee report card be approved as a summary of the work accomplished by the committee. And if I could have a first. I have Mr. Clark and Councillor Neal and Councillor Doherty. So that's lovely. We'll take Mr. Clark and Mr. Neal were first and second, I believe. And if I could have a show of hands for all in favor. And so we are all in favor, and that carries unopposed. Thank you very much. And we will now move over to business item D, appointments to the Housing and Homelessness Review Working Group. So I'm not sure if Ms. Nordegraff, if you want to speak to that or lead a discussion on that.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Not really. I think the key thing here is, as the committee might recall, we brought this forward, I believe it was back in February, to request to review the terms of reference of this committee. That after this committee went to Arts, Recreation and Community Policies and to Council and was approved. So now this basically goes back to this committee to now request interest from members of this committee to participate in that process. I'm happy to turn it over to Mr. Grange to speak to the process, if there are any questions, or I can maybe pass it over to the clerk to share. I just want to make sure people have an understanding of what we're looking for. I see Mr. Grange turns his video on, so I'm sure you can speak to the kind of the process of this working group and what the working group is tasked to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly look for support from the clerk as well here, but really we're, as Ruth indicated, that we're just looking for representatives to support that task of refining and reevaluating and looking at terms of reference and the mandate of the current structure of the committee and how we see it moving forward. I know there's been some discussion of it in the past, which brought it forward to the recommendation report that went to council. So as Ruth indicated, it's come back to us. So really we're just looking for, I'm not sure of the numbers, and I may look to Elizabeth for that, but I know that we're looking for a certain amount of individuals on the committee to support myself, maybe a few other, up to 4, I believe, and then support with us as staff to work cooperatively to determine and come up with new terms of reference.
Yes, I'm not sure, Elizabeth, if there was anything you wanted to add there. It is that we are looking for up to 4 committee members for appointment there, and to review. So as he'd mentioned, the terms of reference, and it would be items like, who should be on this committee? Should we have, for example, somebody from an Indigenous community every time on this committee? For example, what is the mandate here? So there's sort of broad questions that need to be answered and reviewed, and they're critical. They're super important. So I'm wondering if anybody from our committee is interested in taking part. Ms. White, thank you. And so I would also, Councillor Doherty, thank you. I as well would like to take part. So if there is anyone else who is interested, please reach out to Ms. Fawcett, our clerk. You can email her following this as well, if you think about it and decide that you want to join in. But we've got 3 currently. And yes, please, Ms. Fawcett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, it is best for procedurally in order to accept those members onto the working group to pass a motion, just that the committee acknowledges that those are the individuals who will be part of the working group and that they approve of them. It doesn't mean that if a fourth member wishes to join after this meeting, they can be added to the working group at the next meeting. But for this meeting, we can at least add the 3 committee members who have put their names forward for recommendation and approval through the process.
Thank you. Perfect. So I will make a motion that Ms. White, Councillor Doherty, and myself, Ms. Collier, are part of this working group to review the Housing and Homelessness Advisory Committee terms of reference. Can I have a first? Thank you, Ms. McCarty. Can I have a second? Thank you, Councillor Neal. And are all in favor? I see all hands, so that carries unopposed. Thank you very much. Sorry, you know what I did not do is I did not open up that particular business item to the public yet. So are there members of the public who would like to speak to this particular item? I see, Ms. Bossett, you've just turned on your video again. Is that all right?
Of course, Madam Chair, I'm just turning on my video and it, just in case there are any hands that do come up. At this time, I'm not seeing any, but we could, of course, I do actually see one hand. If Madam Chair, if you'd like us to go to members of the public, we can do so now.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask Angela Solomon if she'd like to speak, please.
Hi, thank you so much. I was just going to ask if it is within protocol to allow this working group to have members that are not part of this committee speak, to be part of that working group. Is that allowed, or is it only, can you only draw from the pool of people who are currently sitting on this committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nordergraf. If you would like to respond, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I will, and through you, Madam Chair, I will also defer to the clerk on this, but the one thing that we stated in the reports that went to this committee in February is that the process will also be with engagement of the community. So this will not be a committee that will have 4 members or 3 or 4 members of this table with staff and the clerk's office. It will be an opportunity to get input from the community. So I will have the clerk kind of comment. I don't think we were, the intent was to establish this with members of the public at the table, but it would be an opportunity, for instance, to come and speak to the committee and have input on the terms of reference. And the clerk can totally jump in here if I'm saying something out of line.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. This is also my understanding based on what has been provided by staff at this time. Working groups are open to the public to attend, and they are usually, they should be primarily advertised on the city's website as well by the departments who are looking after those working groups. So that is definitely something that we can work with to ensure that community members are aware of the working group meetings when they happen, and that they are able to attend and provide comment during those sessions as well.
Thank you. Were there any other questions from the public, Elizabeth? Ms. Bossett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do see that Ms. Solomon has put her hand back up, and I will ask if that's all right for you to let, if
yes.
That's all right with you.
Yes.
We'll allow her to speak one more time.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to make maybe a recommendation, and I'm sure this is something you're already thinking about and has been mentioned before, but it would be great to do some targeted outreach apart from just posting on the City of Kingston website, because I think there are probably some people who would like to be involved in some capacity who either don't have access to internet or, you know, all those other things, aren't following the city's actions as closely as some of the rest of us are. So yeah, thanks very much, and I think that's a great idea.
Perfect. Thank you for that comment as well. Ms. Crete.
I'm sorry, I lost my focus for a minute. What will this working group be doing?
This is the working group to review the terms of reference for our committee. So
Okay, what does that mean?
how is this committee comprised? What does this committee review? And in what way? Does it go from this committee still to the Arts and Recreational Committee or straight to council? So there's a few different components that are going to be evaluated.
Okay, I'm interested. I
Perfect.
just needed it clarified. So yes, please.
Perfect. Okay, you would like to be as well, the fourth member of our committee for appointment. Then I will make a motion as well that we add Ms. Francesca Crete as well to this working group. And if I could have a first. Thank you, Ms. McCarty. And then I saw Councillor Doherty, you're good for second. If I could see a show of hands for all in favor, please. Councillor Neal, do I have your hand, please? Thank you. So that was all in favor and none opposed. So that carries. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for offering as well. And Councillor Doherty, please go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to mention, just to anybody listening to and to Francesca's question, one of the things that actually led to this working group is the fact that last summer when COVID hit and Bell Park encampment hit, we as a group, we really felt like we didn't have a chance to speak, to respond, to get community feedback. And it was really, came to a surprise for some of us that it was part of the process that was set in place that actually stopped us from doing exactly that. So I certainly welcome the opportunity to take a look at our terms of reference because we felt like it was there were some shortcomings that need to be addressed.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Elizabeth, I will do one more check, just whether or not there was any other comments from the public.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are no hands raised at this time.
Perfect. So we will now move forward to motions. I have no further motions listed. Notices of motion. There was no notices of motion made previously. And other business, there was no other business noted during the agenda. So I'll move forward to 11 correspondence. We had 4 items of correspondence, and I want to thank each individual that did submit correspondence. It is very appreciated. Thank you for reaching out and for your advocacy. Very appreciated. And we will review the date of the next meeting. So the next meeting of this advisory committee is scheduled for Thursday, September 9th, 2021 at 1 p.m. And please note there may be a special meeting as we reviewed earlier in August. So you will be kept apprised of that as well over the summer. So I will move to adjourn. If I may have a first. Thank you, Councillor Neal, and a second. I think I saw Ms. Crete and Ms. White, and are all in favor of adjournment and having a wonderful summer. Thank you. That carries unopposed as well.
Have a great summer, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time today, for the public that's been with us as well.